All right, so here in this video, we are going to work on all things tables. And when you take a certification exam, whether it be for the 2019 Associate or the 2016 Core Excel exam, there is an entire section that is dedicated to tables, and this seems to be something that trips up many students when they take their exam. So I wanted to go ahead and give you a little bit of a refresher of all things tables.
Okay, so right now this information could easily be turned into a table, but this is basically, at this point, it's just data. It looks like it may be something related to a business, and let's just go ahead and get started with the issue at hand, which is all things tables. So the first thing you would want to do is understand that if you click inside any cell, if this was actually formatted as a table, and I've already told you that it's not, you would have a tab up here. You would see 1 to 2 tabs up here that would indicate, hey, this is already formatted as a table. And because you don't see these tabs up here, you know that this is not formatted as a table. So the first thing we would need to do is to format this as a table. So under your Home tab is where I typically go. You've got this button to format as a table. And so you can click this and you can select any of these table styles. Notice how they are separated by darkness of the colors. You've got dark, medium, and light, or I should say shades of the different colors. And I want to pick one that's somewhere in the middle, and I want to pick this one right here. And if I take my mouse, roll over, and get I'll see a screen tip that shows me exactly which table style this is. And it's important on certification exams that you understand that they may ask you to use a specific table style. So this is how you know which one is which, by using this screen tip. So I'm going to pick this one. And the next thing that you need to know is Excel is pretty good at detecting that if you have already clicked inside of the data, that it does a good job of detecting and asking, hey, is this information that you want to include in this table? And in this case, it is. And the next thing you see here is my table has headers, and this has a checkbox on it. Excel can also correctly detect that this has a header row that gives a description of the data that's in each of these columns. So, account number, associate, priority, budget, expenses, and balance, those are your headers, and those are typically in the top row of the table. Now, if you were to uncheck this, then that goes away, and it's going to consider this first row as part of the data, and that is certainly not the case in this instance. So I want to go back and click this checkbox again, and notice that I've still got the same cells up here, A1 through F11. So now I want to go through and click OK. We're going to see this formatted as a table. All right. So now that we have formatted this as a table, notice how up here that we have a Table Tools Design tab that's available to us. And if I were to click outside of this table, that goes away. So I want to click back inside this and go back and click the Table Tools Design tab. And I want to go over some of the features of a table so that you'll know what does what. Now, first of all, and I'm going to just go over, I'm going to go from left to right on this. Right here is where you can give the table a name, and by default, Excel will name it Table 1 or Table 2 or Table 3, whatever the case may be, based upon how often, how many tables you have tried to name since you have open Excel. And you can come up here and give this table a name, and I'm going to name this let's see, I want to name this Associate Expense Account. So actually I'm going to name it something short. I'm going to name it ASOC ACT. And notice the table names, I have no spaces in there because you cannot have spaces in the name of a table, and to make this the name of this table, I just have to hit the enter button, and now this table has that name. And this is important, as you'll see later on, in how if you have to create formulas, how you can use table names as part of your formulas. Now below that you've got a resize table button. Notice this gives you the option to add columns or rows to a table, and you don't necessarily have to click this button to do so. If you wanted to add a new column or row to a table, you could just click down here, for example, in this last cell, and then you could hit the tab key as I just did on my keyboard, and it would automatically insert a new row. And then you'd put your information in here, and then you can move from cell to cell by hitting the tab key. And then again, when you get to the end, the very last cell, if you hit tab, it would put in another row. So again, you don't even necessarily have to do it like that. And then also, if you wanted to insert an additional column, if you wanted to insert an additional column right here between E and F, what I could do is click up here in the column header for row F, and then you can right click and go to insert, and then you see now how I have an additional column in here that has no name up here, and then you could give it a name up here, and that's whatever you name it would be the column header name in this table. Okay, and I'm going to undo these last couple of steps that I just did, because right now we really don't need them. If you're doing the 2019 Associate or the 2016 Core exam, pivot tables will not be on that. That is an expert level skill. And the next thing you need to see on here is removing duplicates. Now, basically removing duplicates allows you to easily remove data that may be duplicated, especially in a large table. Now, in this particular case, it doesn't look like, and actually we do, we have duplicate associate names in here with two different account numbers. Notice how we got several like this. We've got Janet Colby on here twice, but notice how they have different account numbers. So Janet Colby, and it looks like all of these folks may have two different accounts for whatever reason. Now, in reality, we may not want to remove any duplicates because they have different account numbers. I think if you had if you had an associate that had the same account number, that would just mean that the information would have been duplicated inadvertently, and you'd want to delete one of those. But what I want to do here is I want to click inside this table, and then I want to click remove duplicates, and it's going to ask me here, which one of these fields do you want to delete based upon it having duplicate information? Now, in this case, you might want to look only at the associate. So what we'd want to do is to uncheck everything but associate, and then what it's going to do is if it finds any duplicate associate names, it's going to remove those duplicates from the table. So I'm going to click OK, and you see that it has 4 duplicate values that have been removed, and it leaves 6 unique values remaining. Okay, now again, in this case, I think because those had different account numbers, you would want to actually have all of those remain. So I'm actually going to undo what we just did, and we're going to bring those back. And then I want to do this again, but this time I want to remove the duplicates, and I want to look at associate and account number both, meaning both of those have to be the same in order for these to be removed. So now when I click OK, and we've got both of these selected, if I click OK, notice that it says no duplicate values found, because again it's saying you do not have any instances in this table where you have the same associate name and also the same account number. So in this case, it probably is that these are all valid entries in this table. So that's what it means by removing duplicates. Now, the next thing that I want to show you is convert to a range. Now, converting to a range takes this table and it turns it back into just a normal range of cells, meaning you're going to lose the functionality that comes with a table. Now, you're going to lose the functionality. You're not going to lose the formatting. So notice up here how when I created this table, I have these filter buttons that are up here that allows us to filter and sort the information as we need it on each of these. And we're not going to do any of these right now. I'm going to come back to this shortly. But notice what happens when I click convert to range. It's going to ask, do you want to convert the table to a normal range? Yes, I do. And notice the only thing that really happens is that I lose these filter buttons up here, and I also no longer have the Table Tools Format tab up here available to me, and it's because that this is no longer a table. And notice, and I will tell you what I just showed you how to do, that is something that shows up on the exam, both the exam, the 2016 and 2019, and it's an objective that it is its own objective by clicking one button. So again, I want to undo what I just did because I'm not done explaining this, so I hit the undo button. Notice that these filter buttons come back, as does my Table Tools Design tab. Now, slicers are something that shows up for on the expert level exam, so I'm not going to go over that here, but basically all a slicer is, it's a button that allows you to apply various filters so that instead of having to use these, you've got buttons that you could click and you'd see everything automatically. Exporting, I rolled over that. That is nothing that would show up on the 2019 Associate, 2016 Core level exams. This refreshing of the table data, none of that shows up on the Core or / Associate. And by the way, I say Core and Associate because on the 2016 exam, they refer to it as the Core exam. And then on the 2019 exam, they refer to it as the Associate exam. I mean, it's basically the same thing, but the objectives are slightly different. All right, so the next thing that I want to show you here is these table style options, because this messes up a lot of folks. Now, first of all, we've already established what the header row is. It's when you have the first row, the top row, is formatted differently because it contains the descriptive title of what information is in each column. And when we first created this table, we indicated that it had header rows, so that's why that is already checked. Total row is something that shows up a lot on certification exams. Now, notice here it says a total row. Basically what it does is it automatically adds an additional row to this table, and it allows you to do things like get totals, as you might think, but it also allows you to display the function or the average of a range of sales, or find the highest number or the lowest number or the standard deviation. So let me just show you what that does. So if you click this total row button, notice how you get automatically an additional row down here at the bottom. And by default, it puts in this final cell out here a sum function. Notice how when I click on this cell, I've got an arrow here. And I've got all the different options of what I can put in down here. So by default, it gives me the sum, but again, you could put this in as the average of these numbers above it. You can get a count, which is the number of entries that you have. And remember, there's a difference between sum and count. Sum will give you a total. Count will give you the number of entries. And count numbers does the same thing, but the difference is count numbers will literally count the number of cells that contains numbers, where count will give you the number of cells with anything in it. And then you've got max, which is the highest number, min, which is the smallest number, sum, as I've already established, is the total, and then the standard deviation, and then you've got this one, and honestly, I can't even remember the variance, I believe is what this one is, and then you'd even put in more functions down here. And again, on a certification exam, For the associate, you know, if they ask you to do any of these, it's going to be the ones that are pretty standard, either the sum, average, count, min, max. It's going to be one of those. They're probably not going to ask you standard deviation or anything of that nature. But also notice that, again, you could come out here and you can also add additional features out here. So again, I want to change this one. I want to put the sum in here as well. And in this case, because I did that, I get these hashtags, as most of you probably know these as. I know them as a pound sign because I'm old. And this means that the column is too narrow to display the contents. And I'm going to do the same thing here, and I want to add in a maximum here as well. And this number does fit, and then I want to double click the right border of column E to auto fit this to the width. And we're going to leave it like this. And so here in all these cells, I have the sum, and then notice how up here in the formula bar, you get actually what's called a, it gives you a subtotal. These are technically subtotals, and 109 is the code that goes with the sum. So if you want the sum, you would put in 109. If you were hard coding this, if you didn't know how to use these features and you were wanting to type this in manually, 109 is the code that gives you the sum. And by the way, notice here that it says balance. Because we're inside of a table, what Excel will do is take the title from the header row, and rather than giving you a range of cells, it gives you the name that is displayed in the header row. And again, that's important to know when you start building additional formulas in here. And I guess I'll build one here shortly just to make a point. But I want to hit the escape key on this. And then what I want to do is I want to change these two right here, though. I want to change them to average. And when I change this to average, notice how that number changes, but look up here in the formula bar how this changes to 101. Now, I don't think you need to know that because, again, that's probably more than what you would need to know on a core level exam or associate level because, again, the expectation is that you just simply know how to click these buttons and change these over to whatever function that you want. So that's what total row does, and that shows up frequently on exams. Next, you have banded rows, and banded rows, I see this a lot on the exams, where banded rows is where the rows alternate in how they are formatted, and depending upon the table style that you picked in the very beginning. You know, here we're using shades of green, so we've got basically you could say a light green and a medium shade green. So again, here this is more of a medium shade, light, medium, light, and then of course the dark shades of green are reserved for the header row and the total row. Now, if I were to uncheck this, look what happens. You get this. And you lose the alternating colors. Now, if you go back and click that again, you have to actually click it and it'll add it back in there. And again, when you take the exam, you have to look at your data and you have to think about, well, is this actually formatted as a table? Remember, first you've got to format it as a table, and if it's already formatted as a table, and you know so because you've got this Table Tools Design tab, then you have to know that banded rows, banded refers to alternating colors. Now, they may also ask you to use banded columns, which is basically the opposite, where you would want to color in the columns in alternating shades of whatever color is used with this particular table. And depending upon the layout of the data, I can go ahead and tell you probably you're not going to need banded columns in reality, but for the sake of a certification exam, you may need to know that. So I want to come back here and I want to make this banded rows again because that's what it should be. Now also you've got first column and last column. Now again, this does exactly what you probably think. First column will display special formatting for the first column of the table. So if I were to click that, it would look like this. But of course, now you've lost your banding, and this may or may not be what you want. It kind of depends upon how the data is laid out in the table. So I want to uncheck that and then do the same thing for the last column. Now, because the last column of this table displays balances or in a total down here, you may have a legitimate need to want to make this last column stand out and have it look different. And again, if that's the case, you would use last column. So that's what that does. And then the filter button right here is if you were to uncheck this, then the only thing that does is to remove those filter buttons for the table. Now, you could go back and click the button again and add them back in, and then you would be able to do more with this table. Okay, so now the last thing I really need to show you is sorting and filtering, and applying a table or making data contain the properties of a table is primarily beneficial when you talk about putting this data in a particular order, or also if you want to filter out only certain pieces of data. So let's start working on that. And there's a couple different ways you can do it, but we're going to start up here and we're going to go by the balance field. And if I click on this arrow right here that's got a balance in it, and we're talking about money amounts and dollar amounts. So what we want to do is we want to sort this because it's got numbers in it. Right here it's going to say sort smallest to largest. So we want the smallest balance first and the largest balance last. So I'm going to click this and notice that how it's sorted here. We have this one expense account. It looks like they exceeded their budget by $15,000. So minus $15,000 is less than 0. So that's why this one is listed first. And by the way, this particular table is formatted so that negative numbers are displayed with parentheses around the outside, which is it's a typical accounting format feature. And then negative 10,000 is actually greater than negative 15,000, which is why this is listed in this order. All right, so as you go down here, you see that these are indeed listed smallest to largest. Now, notice here I've got two numbers that are negative 10,000. And let's say that I wanted to add an additional column. And I tell you what, this additional column, what if we wanted to find out who missed their budget by the largest amount of, percentage-wise? So earlier we talked about resizing the table, and that's what we want to do here. We want to find out, we want to be able to find out who missed their budget by the largest percentage. So what we want to do is we want to come back into the Table Tools Design tab if necessary and click that. And then I want to click this Resize Table button. And then I want to make this go not through column F, but I want to make this go through column G. So I'm actually going to come up here and change this F to a G and click OK, and it's going to add an additional column to this table. And again, it still has the it's within the table that gives me the formatting and the properties of the table. So what I want to do is change this column header to, I want to put in a % sign, and I'll type in the word off. I want to find out how much were we off. And again, I'm just keeping it simple. So if you want to find out exactly how far off from your actual budget were you, what you could do is you could put a formula in here that takes the balance and divides it by the budget. So all formulas start with an equal sign, which you know that by now. And the quick method when you're working within a table, and this is something that will show up on the exam probably, that it's more of a time-saving method. When you format as a table, you could use the column names or the header rows, if you will, as part of a formula. So what I want to do is to do that, you would have to put in the right bracket the square bracket, which is directly to the right of the P key, and then that will show you the header row names that you have in this table. So what we want to do is we want to take our balance. Now, you could take this and you can manually type this in if you wanted to, but I'm going to come down here and find my balance. I'm going to double click it, and then I got to follow that with a right square bracket. And notice how when I do that, I get automatically, it highlights all of the cells that are in that balance column that actually have data in it. Now again, you got to remember, if this table had 1,000 pieces of data in it as opposed to 10, this feature that I just showed you would save you a whole lot of time, because for the formula to be correct on the exam, you would have to actually scroll down or use some other method to find out how many rows are in this table. So we'll put in a division symbol, which is a slash, and then I want to repeat the process, but this time we want to start by putting in a right square bracket, and we want to use our budget. So I'm just going to type this one in, and I'm going to follow this with a right square bracket, and I do this a lot of times. I actually have to put a space in there, and then I put in a right square bracket, and when I do that, then that is the official name of this column. And apparently when this table was created, it automatically put in a space after the word budget. But anyway, that's what happens. So sometimes you just have to put that space in there before you put a right bracket in there, but it works. So now I want to hit the enter key on my keyboard, and notice when I do that, I get all of these numbers that are formatted. So what I want to do now is I want to select the column header for row G, because again, I want you to assume that this table has 1,000 pieces of data in it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go back under the Home tab, which I'm already there. And I'm going to click this percentage button, percent style. And then I want to increase the decimal to 2 decimal points. And again, this gives us another piece of data that lets us know how close to your budget were you actually. Okay, so now let's look at sorting this, because right now we've got this sorted according to our balance, smallest to largest. But what if we wanted to sort it according to how far off your budget were you? So now I could sort it like this, smallest to largest, and notice how all of this data changes. So if you're going by percentage, that information is separate. So, and then the next thing that you might want to do is, let's say we wanted to sort this in 2 different methods. Okay, now this particular table that we're looking at, you really only have one instance where you would need to sort by 2 different methods, because we got 2 different balances here, negative 10,000. So what we're going to do is we're going to sort this first. We're going to go back and sort it largest to smallest. And then again, these 2 down here are in, because these are negative numbers, they're at the bottom. And then over here, when we look at these are in ascending order by, and it looks like it, well, in this case, they're just in order according to this. But what if we had this and we wanted this to be in maybe ascending order according to, or descending order according to the associate name? So what we would do was we could come back here and we could click this button right here. And actually we can't do it like this, so let me do what I should have done to start. And there's a couple of different ways to do this, and I've done this, I mean, again, I'm trying to teach you how to do it where I would have already had it done if I was just doing it for myself. If you go under the Data tab, you've got this Sort button. So if you click the Sort button, it's going to open up the sort field for you. And notice how it's already sorted by balance, largest to smallest. Well, what if we wanted to sort this by associate? So what you would do is you would add a level. And then we want to choose to sort it by associate. And it's already sorted in ascending order by associate. Let's sort it in descending order. And because we have text in this field, it says A to Z and not largest to smallest, because again, we've got text and not numbers. So I want to click on this and I want to change this from Z to A, which is descending order. So the only change that's going to be made when I click OK is these two records are going to switch places. And here, notice how Nancy Allen is now listed before George Whale, because N comes after G, and that's how this is sorted. And we said we wanted to sort it in descending order. All right, so now let's spend a little time with filtering out data. Now, to filter means to sort out and remove what you don't need so that you see only what you need to see. And there's a couple of different ways that we can sort this data, or filter it, I should say. And right now what I want to do is I want to go back, and I just want to go under the associates. And let's say if I click the arrow, if I only wanted to see, for example, one of these people, what I could do is to uncheck this select all button. And let's say I wanted to see Janet Colby only. I could click on Janet Colby's name and then click OK. And I would see only information for Janet Colby, and I would see only her data. And notice how down here on the total rows, that information updates based upon the information that it contains in the table right now. Now that data, it's still in there, it's just filtered out right now, and it's not taken into consideration on these calculations. Now, let's say if I wanted to see not Janet Colby, but let's say I wanted to see George Whale and Chris Lowe only. Well, then I would click both of them, and then I could come back here and I could click Janet Colby's name to uncheck that. And now I can see only George Whale and Chris Lowe. So I want to click on that, and now I see only information for those two associates. And notice George Whale has got two different accounts, so I see all of that information that is pertaining to them only. And again, the total row down here has updated to show me only those associates. And you could use any of these to filter out data. Now, I'll do some other things. I want to come back here, and I want to select all. And by the way, when you see this, where you see a black square in here, that means that you have select some but not all of the available filters that you have. If I were to click this button again right now and put a check mark in it, then that indicates that all of the options are selected and are included. And if I were to click it again and then there's nothing in there, that means nothing has been selected, nothing's been filtered out. So again, I'm going to go back and click select all to make them all in there, and click this again. And then there's other things that you can do with filters that probably are a little bit more of expert level skills, but you never know. So for example, and again, I want to point out to you, this particular example that I'm using does not have dates on it. So I can't show you how to do date filters. But I do want to show you a couple of things. First of all, if I go back, notice how we got text filters. And maybe you want to find all associates where the name contains, for example, Joe. And we know there's a Joe that's in here, so you could just type in J-O-E, and it's not case sensitive. So then you would hit enter, and then you would find only the associate, in this case named Joe. Now, if, by the way, if there was somebody in there named Joseph, notice how that's spelled J-O-S-E-P-H, so that person would not show up in the list. You have to make sure that you include that string of characters as it actually appears. So then I can come back here again, and I could go some other text filters. If you want to find an exact match, you can use equals and find an exact match. And there's some other things that you could do, but again, these typically are more of expert level type skills. And again, it's kind of hard to replicate every possible example that might come up here. So you do need to spend some time experimenting this with itself, because this file will be included with the video where you can practice. So I want to clear that filter, and then I'm going to come back here, and I do want to show you some of these filters that are pertaining to numbers. So I want to come over here under the percent off feature, and what I want to do is I want to go to, and let's say if I go to number filters. Now, because you're dealing with numbers, you got different options. You got equals, where if you want to find a specific number, you can put that in. Or if you're looking for everybody that does not meet a specific criteria, you can do that. If you want to find everybody that's greater than a certain, so what I want to do is I want to put in greater than or equal to, and I want to put in, and right now, because I had clicked, notice right here it says percent off, that's the field I'm looking in. I want to say is greater than or equal to 50%. And when I type in 50% and hit enter, notice I see only the ones that are more than 50% off of their budget based upon their actual expenses. And these two people right here, they were budgeted for a whole lot of possible expenses, but they didn't have very many expenses. So that could be a good thing or a bad thing. It's kind of hard to say, but if that's the kind of information that you want, that's how you would do it. Now I'm going to come back and remove that number filter. And then I want to come back here again, and let's look at some of these other options. If you're looking for something that's less than or less than equal to, if you want to find something that's between a specific range of numbers. Now top 10, all of these would be in the top 10 because we've got 10 records, so that one wouldn't do us anything. But you've also got options for above average or below average, and what this will do is if you want to find everything that was let's say above the average, meaning we want to find the extremes, how far were you off based upon, were you too high over this number or too low over this number. It's going to take all these, it's going to give an average, and it's going to calculate the average automatically, and it's going to give us one that was too far off the average. So we'll click above average, and so these three right here are off above the average. And again, it's based upon everybody else, so that may or may not be in reality, that may not be useful information to you. The next thing we'll do is come back. I want to clear that filter again, and let's look at this last option or two that we've got under number filters. You can create custom filters. Of course, you've also got below average, but when you start creating custom filters, you've got these options in there, and you could create, you've got all this stuff in there that you can do. And again, I would say custom filters are probably going to be more of expert level skills, so I wouldn't put too much effort into that. And by the way, one other little thing that I just noticed on this, notice how these percentages, because of how these numbers are formatted as accounting with negative numbers being displayed using parentheses, but when we use this number format right here, when we formatted this as a percentage and rounded it to 2 decimals, it gave us it formatted these using a minus sign. And I would say generally you would want to be consistent, but that is another lesson for another video. You'd probably want to change the formatting of these numbers so that they also, instead of using just the minus sign, they use parentheses to indicate that it's a negative number. But again, that's another lesson for another video. So the last thing that I want to show you here, after we've learned how to filter records, is we want to learn how to remove table rows or columns. And then earlier I showed you how to insert columns and rows, but I didn't show you how to remove them, and it's pretty simple. If you wanted to remove this last column that I put in extra from what this activity really had, really you can right click on any of these column headers and I could right click it and I can click delete. And then that is now gone from that table, and it's the exact same thing where if I wanted to delete a row of data, I could right click it and I would hit delete as well on that, and that information is gone. And of course, notice when you do that that all this information down here updates automatically. And you know, if we didn't want to really do that, we can click the undo to put it back in. And then I'm actually going to hit undo again to bring this in. And again, now you know how to also remove columns. And by the way, if you were told on the exam to remove the total row, you would have to come back under the Table Tools Design tab and then uncheck Total Row. And then it would make that go away. And I actually want to click the undo button because I want to undo what I just did, and I want to bring these back. Remember, we changed these to be the average, and that's what I actually wanted it to be. So that's why I did the undo instead of going through and redoing the total row and adding that in. It just saved me a little bit of time. So anyway, at this point, you have seen everything demonstrated to you pertaining to the adding of the creation of the 2016 core exam / 2019 associate exam. The only thing that is not on the 2019 exam specifically is to removing duplicate records. That is not on the 2019 exam as I look at the list of objectives, but everything else is covered on both exams. So regardless of whether or not you're preparing for the 2016 or the 2019 exam, this activity represents a very useful review. So if you haven't already done so, this file will be attached to the YouTube file, so the YouTube page, so that you can download this file and practice with it individually if you like. Again, thank you for your time, and hope you found this very enlightening.